Yeah, it's amazing. Leading worship is a lifestyle, né? So it's not a moment, it's a lifestyle. So we just have to acknowledge that this is who they are, and they come to share it with us. So this evening we're doing the last one of the Father, and dis vir my regtig opgewonde. God really invited me to participate with the ministry of the Father a few years ago. And so these 2 months were special. You're welcome to open in page 39. If you're visiting for the first time, or if you have not received the book, you're really welcome. Tian is standing at the back, and we'd love to generously just gift you with a book, just so you can be on the same page, literally, as us. Anyone? Dankie. Thank you. Tian, is ons nog so 1 of 2 baie dankie. Thank you. So, talking about the ministry of the Father, this is our last one. We're going to talk about God being the sovereign ruler of all the earth. And the text we're looking at is beautiful. It's in John chapter 18. Next week, Melissa is going to lead us in the first one in the book of Hebrews, in Jesus being the Son of God. But tonight we're talking about God the Father being sovereign. And a number of years ago, in the congregation, we had a family that the married couple have been married for a few years, and then the lady fell pregnant, and she didn't feel she was ready to be a mother, so it was a big shock. And then the bigger one, as they did a scope in 20 weeks, they noticed there's some big deformities and heart defects in the baby. And it was a difficult few months. The little baby, Emma, lived only for 9 months after the birth. And it was a very difficult, not just for the couple, but for the family. And the next year in January, we started, after burying Emma, we started ministering the year. We thought we're going to pray through the foundations of our faith. And the Apostolic Creed says, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, the creator and sustainer of all life. And we just had to stop for a moment and to say, this is really difficult. This is the problem that we as Christians face. We believe in God who's a dad, who's the author of life, who's loving, who loves his children, who's kind, who's protecting, who's generous, who's the source of life. God who's present and alive. God who is sovereign. Sovereign, Almighty Father, why do we suffer? So the question we're asking tonight is the most difficult question that we're asking. Maybe I can just ask someone at the back, just that the door's going to slam. And I'm prophetic that way. I can see the wind blowing. But just to recognize that this is a difficult topic. And it's something I really want you to wrestle with. And I must say, the older you get, the more we confront it. When I was young, when I was 20, 25, when we planted the church, when I was 20, being a student, going on mission outreaches, I was all about God is the Almighty, powerful one, the Holy Spirit's here, Shandai, Shandai, boom, healing, poof. And life is all about the victorious Christian life, you know. You know, Satan, you can't touch me, da, 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 da. We had this mindset of being victorious, of being God being powerful. But the longer I live, the more I recognize that Jesus was serious when he said, in this world you will have trouble. The longer I've been a pastor, the past 20 odd years, I recognize that no one escapes the fire. No one. I mean, Jesus said, if you have a desire in your heart to pursue me, Jesus said, brace up, boy. You're going to get it. In this life, you will have trouble. And the longer I live, the more I appreciate the fact that we as Christians don't escape the fire, because we can truly bear with empathy with those around us suffering. Because as Paul said to the church in Corinth, his opening words and second letters, God has blessed you and graced you and comforted in your suffering so that you might comfort others with the same comfort you yourself has received. God is a comforter. How would you know God the comforter? that God walks with those that walk through the fire. How would you know that? Can you imitate God unless you yourself has experienced that, you know? So when I talk this, I know this is a heavier topic, and this morning I was like struggling. I'm like, yes, Jesus, it is so lekker nie. Can't I tell you that God loves you and that you will never suffer? But there will be a day when I can say that, when the angel announces that trumpet blast and Jesus comes and he fetches us and his kingdom descends on us, and there will be no more suffering, no more sickness, no more. If this world had us, if God in this world shielded us from all the harm in this world, we won't yearn for his kingdom to come, because everything will be so lekker, so lekker. So I want us to read from John chapter 18. This is the last one, talking about the Father being sovereign. And the point in John's Gospel, remember why we're looking at John's Gospel when we talk about the Father, because more than 250 times in these 22 chapters, Jesus refers to his dad, to his Father. Jesus really came, 12 times a chapter, came to reveal the Father to us. So in this instance, we see Jesus in front of Pilate. The context, the scene is heavy. This is Jesus in front of Pilate. Jesus have been beaten unjustly. Jesus have been arrested. Jesus was just betrayed by his close ally, his close friend, his disciple that he walked with intimately for years. He knew it's going to happen, but that sting was there. In this, Jesus was also betrayed by Peter by this time, and all the disciples who left him. So Jesus really was alone. So Jesus prayed, he broke the bread, Passover. Judas left, Judas betrayed him. He walked to the garden, he prayed. He says, oh God, I know what's going to happen now. I'm the lamb tonight, né? I'm the lamb. It's Passover. I'm the lamb this Passover. And Jesus knew it. I'm the lamb. This is me. And he was praying. He says, Father, please, let this cup pass from me. Please not. He was praying, sweating. All his friends were like, yeah, we'll pray for you. Sleep. And Jesus 3 times had to wake them and says, please pray with me. Please. We are sometimes those friends, né? We are sometimes those. We have those friends, but mostly we are those friends. And then Jesus was arrested, and Peter was there with his sword, chopped off. The boy ducked. He didn't chop off the head. He just chopped off the ear. Jesus restored his ear. And then Jesus said, let it be, boys. Let it be. This is the Father. And he left. And he went to the Sanhedrin. Now, this is probably the most shocking scene of injustice in the world. This is a man in whom there is no deceit. He just went about doing good. That's it. And because of political jealousy, the Sanhedrin, now I want you to get this, the Sanhedrin were the bearers of the light of the world. That was their description. They, as Isaiah says, they are the light of the world. They're the ones who are custodians of God's law, so that all the world can see how good God's kingdom is. They are the ones who were entrusted, the elders of Israel, the 72 elders of Israel, entrusted with a high priest, entrusted to show the world, see our God is just. Look at his justice. See how we've got a rule of justice, not like the other nations. And then, what do? They have a quick setup, a trial where they already decided he's guilty. They already decided to execute him with murder. And now they have a secret high court meeting in the middle of the night with no judges, no people sitting in, no CNNs coming in, no witnesses. Jesus didn't have a chance to do anything, but they grabbed a few witnesses trying to figure out how can we frame him. And then they pronounced him guilty. They beat him before they tried him. And then they pronounced him guilty. Caiaphas was the head. He was a mob high priest, the mob leader of Israel those days. He was not the real high priest. He was a political pawn by Herod, appointed to rule on his behalf. And the high priest, and they pronounced Jesus there in a short span of time, one evening. No witnesses, no anything, no rebuttal. Jesus didn't have time to say anything, and they pronounced him dead. They pronounced him guilty by execution. Trial, you're gonna be executed for your trial, blasphemy. That's it. before the evening's over, this high court, there's no appeal, there's no nothing, no one knows. And then they march him as soon as the sun is up. They march him to Pilate. Pontius Pilate was a political leader by the Roman oppressors, appointed by Caesar Augustus, who called himself King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the Son of God. That was his title that he had, and he positioned Pilate to rule Judea on his behalf. And the Jews knew they couldn't execute Jesus, so they're going to make Pilate execute him. That was their decision. The light of the world, the Sanhedrin, bearers of the justice of God, are marching to kill an innocent man. And they're going to force Pilate to play their hand. And I want you to see the irony here. Because Pilate is an ungodly Roman citizen. He doesn't deem the Jews as the people of God, and he doesn't think people are created in the image of God. They truly believe that the Romans are superior to all the other nations. So he doesn't have a sock for this person's life. But he's the one defending Jesus, saying, listen, I can't find anything wrong in him. Are you sure you want to kill this guy? Can't I beat him? Can't I whip him for a while with a whip of 9 tails, with lead and bone and glass, ripping off his skin? Are you happy now? You're not happy. I just want you to see the contrast here. So after Pilate had said this, he went back outside to the Jews, because he just said to Jesus, listen, talk to me. I can make you go free. I can set you free. I can set you free. And then Jesus didn't say anything to Pilate. He was a lamb led to a slaughter, quiet. He knew his role, Isaiah. After Pilate had said this to Jesus, he went back outside to the Jews. The irony is, the Jews were all standing outside of Pilate's court. They refused to go into the Gentile court, into the court, because they don't want to defile themselves. They schemed and beat Jesus all night to execute him, but they don't want to defile themselves by coming close to a Gentile. I mean, so the irony is like, you're kidding, guys. He went back outside to the Jews. He told them, I find no guilt in Jesus, but you have a custom that I should release one of you at Passover. So do you want me to release to you this King of the Jews? And they cried out to him, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was a robber, was a political violent man, a very vile person. So the contrast is, they want Barabbas out. The light of the world, the justice of God, custodians of justice, wants this man, not the other man. Now, Barabbas was a robber. Then Pilate took Jesus. He flogged him with a cat of 9 tails, lead-tipped, glass-tipped. His back was peeled. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, hid it over him, and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came to him saying, Hail the King of the Jews! And they struck him with their hands. And Pilate went out again and said to them, See, after whipping him, are you happy yet? I'm bringing him to you that you may know that I find no guilt in him. So Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe. Pilate said to them, Behold the man! And when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, Crucify him, crucifying, bloodthirsty. Pilate said to them, Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. And when Pilate heard this statement, the superstitious man became really afraid. He entered his headquarters again and he said to Jesus, Where are you from? Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and I have the authority to crucify you? And for the first time, Jesus opened his mouth and he says, You would have no authority over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you, he has the greatest sin. Weighty words, weighty words. Pilate said, I have the authority to let you go. Jesus said, You think you're in control. You're not in control. You're just playing your part. There's someone sovereign. My Father is sovereign. I had a conversation with him last night in the garden. I asked him, Will you make this cup pass for me? He said, No. So you don't have a say here. God is in control. I'm submitting to him. I'm yielding to him. Don't worry, you don't have the greatest sin here. Those guys outside, they have the greatest sin. It's a heavy text. The dark irony, obviously, in this text is the fact that the wicked cruelty of the Sanhedrin, the judges, the elders of Israel, the wicked cruelty, the custodians of the light of the world. And the older I become, it's good to say they are evil, but we've seen this. We've seen this. We've seen mob cruelty, mob violence. We see racial hatred welling up in a group of people, killing someone, or rampaging someone, or tearing down buildings. We've seen bullying in high schools, school grounds, where someone is just hated by everyone for no apparent reason. We've seen the cruelty of bullying, of violence. We've seen it before. But the funny thing is the custodians, the irony is the custodians of the Sanhedrin, but Pilate's the one who says, listen, no, you shouldn't kill this man. He's your man. I don't mind, really. But this is not right. This is not right. He's trying to, the ungodly man who worships not God is saying, no, we shouldn't do this. And then obviously the irony of Pilate saying to him, listen, I'm in control. I'm the judge of this court. We're going to do this. And Jesus smiling, saying, you're not in control. You have no authority unless it's given to you by God. You can only do what God permits. You're not in control in this scene. It's really beautiful. While we're looking at this, I want you to consider this text, this images behind you. I heard from someone with a small kid back there that I was likened to one of these people. You can guess which one. Anyway, but if we look at leaders, because this issue that we have here today about leadership, about authority, about power on earth, this is the issue. Jesus is looking at Pilate, is looking at the Sanhedrin, and then Herod's also playing a part here. Not going to go into that, but all of them are leaders appointed with great authority and power. And Jesus, the King of the world, is being whipped and beaten by them. The true King, the true authority over the world is being beaten. He submits and yields to his Father who is in control, but he's standing in front of them. And I like this image when we look at that, because I want to ask you a question. Looking at these leaders as images, I mean, people that are in the news a lot recently, I wonder, do you feel somewhat skeptical of leadership in our world? Do you find yourself less than trusting in this world? Yeah. Yeah. I love that phrase in John chapter 2. Jesus just did his first miracle after the 7 days of his ministry starting. And the seventh day, there's a massive wedding feast. And he does this amazing miracle. And people figure out what he did. And then at the end, it says that many people started following and believing in Jesus. The Greek word, trusting in Jesus. But then the next sentence says, but Jesus did not entrust himself to them because he knows what's in the heart of man. Hectic, no? Jesus didn't trust men. They trusted him, but he didn't entrust himself to them because he knows what's in the heart of man. And it's a beautiful statement. I think the longer we live, the more we realize that the next leader is not the big answer. Not cynical, not skeptic, suspicious of leadership, always. But you know that I'm a pastor standing in front of you tonight. And you've probably in the last 6 months read an article of some pastor that was a great man of God. Figured out, he's not. He's not. He had an affair. He stole money. He did miracles for money. I don't know what else we do. He's teaching strange things. He gets into politics. He embezzles. I don't know what else, stuff. But it's probably the same for you, that when you think back on your teaching days, there might be a teacher whom you trusted who also betrayed you, who also did hurtful things to someone that you loved. Maybe back at home, there was a father figure in your life, a mother figure in your life, a parent whom you trusted. But this person, you figured out the greatest hurt you're carrying is because this person wasn't whom you thought he should be. If you think back on your work career, you might have worked for someone or with someone and figured out at some point that this leader in your work is also not who we're supposed to be. And you really got hurt because there was a scene of justice. Maybe at the moment you're going through an unjust work situation or unjust study situation, and it's really hurtful. It's really painful because deep down we know that leaders are supposed to lead us, to protect us, to bear the weight for us. Deep down we know that that's how God created leadership, that was the goal of leadership, someone being trained up, someone being raised up, a safe space for us. And we figure out whether it's a president or a school headmaster or a father or a teacher or a director at work. We figure out that deep down in the heart of every single person there is sin. And sin we call selfishness, self-serving, using this position for myself, not for the others. So mistrust of power, abuse of power, self-preservation versus public service, and it leads to injustice. This is not the way it ought to be. This is not right. Injustice. This is not the way it ought to be. See, this is the morning. In the morning when I ministered, this is the same point where people just went, oh, gits. Is there a bright side here? There is a bright side at the end. Okay. Smile next to the person and say, there is someone whom we can trust. Say mooi. So looking at the scene before Jesus before Pilate, this phrase of Jesus, you would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Maybe it's worthwhile just to memorize that text for yourself the next time you stop by a traffic officer. Try it. Write me afterwards how it went. But Jesus' confidence before Pilate, and he knows his Father, he loves his Father is good. His Father is almighty. His Father, he just says, is my protector in the previous chapter. And he's standing there and he's looking at Pilate, and he's been beaten and whipped. I mean, by that time, his body must have been so extremely weak. So extremely weak. But I can just picture that scene, and you've seen it in one or two of the depictions of the gospel videos, movies, of Jesus just in a sense, calmly, confidently saying to the man who's pleading, saying, come on, take this out. Just give me your hand. I'm going to tap you out here. I can let you go. Just say something in your defense and I can swing this whole thing. And Jesus has this confidence saying, you're really not in control, Pilate. My Father's in control. And my Father has chosen this path for me, that I could lead many people to salvation, many sons to glory. I'm participating with my Father. This is extremely painful. It's going to get worse. I know it's going to get worse for me now. But this is my Father's will, and I'm yielding to my Father's will. God is sovereign, and I said yes last night in the garden. I said yes last night. That scene in the garden is beautiful, no? Because a few thousand years earlier, there was a first Adam who stood in front of a tree in a garden. And there was a serpent who said, listen, God has a will for you, but you can choose something else. You can choose something else, and it's going to be lekker for you. You can choose your own way. And first Adam said, not your will, my will be done. And then a few thousand years later, there's a man in a garden, the last Adam, standing at that tree, and the next day there would be another tree, and he knew it. And he said to Satan, no, not my will be done, but his will be done. Coming back, bringing us back to glory, bringing us back to submission, yielding, demonstrating that God truly is good. and that God truly is sovereign, but also showing us that the way of the Lamb is the way of life, the way of yielding. We just worship the Lamb tonight. I just want you to remember that always. We worship a crucified Savior. We worship a crucified Lord. We worship a God who has wounds. You have to keep that in mind. It's the way we're invited to live. There's no authority except from God, and those who exist have been instituted by God. The word authority here in these two texts is the Greek word exousia, and it literally means the right to rule, to lead, to exercise that power. It means that it's legitimate power. It means that the person has been entrusted with real power, and it's right for him or her to yield that power for goodness within his position. And Jesus is saying to Pilate, you only have authority that is in submission in the line of God, and you don't have the authority, you don't have the power or the right to set me free right now, because you're not in control. Another point, Paul a little bit later saying, speaking of Nero, saying, you know what, guys, every authority that exists to serve God. It's been appointed by God, and it serves God. That's the context of authority. It means real power. It means the freedom and the power and the might to do that which you want to do in service of the mandate that you have. Acts chapter 2, verse 23, and this is where it gets really interesting. And this is where we can see in the life of Jesus, but we can also see it in Joseph and Daniel and his friends, in Job's life. We can see this pattern, because in Acts chapter 2, 50 days after this crucifixion, so it's 50 days, less than 2 months, 50 days after this, Peter was standing up, the Holy Spirit was poured out in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. It was another great feast of the Jews, so the city and the market was full of people who brought their produce, the feast of harvest, of first fruits, and they brought it to Jerusalem. So the city was buzzing with people, and the Holy Spirit descended upon these disciples in the upper room, and as the 120 of them came out speaking in tongues, prophesying, going crazy. It's like a Pentecostal service in the middle of the Philippines or Africa. It's lekker, het gaan lekker. And people go and say, these people are drunk, they're crazy, what are they doing? And then Peter stood up and said, no, this is not people being crazy. This is the fulfillment of the prophecies, let me tell you. And then part of his defense is saying, this Jesus delivered up according to the definite plan and the foreknowledge of God, you crucified, you killed at the hands of lawless men. I want you to see something. When you speak about God's sovereignty, it is not independent, it is not separate from the actions of normal people, of leaders. And it doesn't mean that these people are godly people. In fact, he's saying, these people, God planned it, God orchestrated it, God steered this position. These were godless people. And we just looked at the godless Sanhedrin, the godless Pilate, the godless Herod. It's godless. Godless Judas. Everyone played their part, but God is saying, God's sovereign will happens at the hands of normal people. And many times it's people in authority, and it's godless people in authority. God is steering the situation of the whole world for his redemption. Those seals that Jesus in the book of Revelation tears open one by one to unveil God's plan of redemption of the world. Every time that happens, whether it's a seal or whether it's a bucket being pulled out or whether it's a trumpet being blasted, images showing that something behind the scenes is happening, and we see earthquakes. I want to say, goodness gracious, great balls of fire. It's earthquakes, it's sickness and pestilence, it's governments going to war in Europe and the Middle East, it's family feuds, it's godless leaders doing their things. It's just revealing that this world are really in trouble and that no one can save it. There's only one. That's the whole thing. It shows the wickedness in the heart. So God's sovereignty is not independent of human actions. It allows for injustice to bring about God's justice and his redemption. I wrote here in the next slide, it says, the trial and the death of Jesus is the most sobering depiction of how God's sovereign work of redemption triumph over Satan's schemes and man's cruel abuse of power. And the irony is that because of this absolute injustice, through this absolute injustice and cruelty, God brought about our justification. Jesus was unfairly treated and abused so that we can also be unfairly forgiven and restored. This morning. But I just wanted to see something, because we're looking at Jesus now. God is sovereign over Jesus, but there were pictures in the Old Testament of God's redemption plan already. I mean, Joseph's story, we read it again the other day. Danny invited us to just read it together. And Joseph's story is so beautiful, because you know how Joseph's story starts. It was a boy being favored by his dad, and his brothers were jealous about him. It's a normal family story, every single family on the earth, no? It's a normal family story. And then Joseph was beaten, thrown in the pit. They wanted to kill him. But then they say, no, let's make money out of him. So they sold their brother into slavery. This off. Sold him into slavery, ripped the stuff and said, told dad he's dead. I mean, breaking your dad. It's cruel, it's wicked, it's selfish. Né? Dis verskillik. But then in this situation, he's being sold and he's working as a slave in Egypt in Potiphar's house. There is this lustful, perverse woman who just wants this young, beautiful Jewish boy for herself. And he's godly enough to say, yes, Sally, and my fati. Can't touch this. Ne? And he danced around and she ripped his robe off. Or I can't remember who ripped who. Yes, she ripped his robe off. And then he fled the scene. And then he was beaten and thrown in a prison for just being a godly man again. And he spent a few years in prison doing good, being good in every situation, serving God where he was. And then a few years later, there was a scene of a dream. He was in the right place, was remembered, he was invited out. And then when his brothers came to him and bowed down, and their eyes opened and they figured out, this is Joseph, our brother whom we've killed, and how he's this mighty, what do we call him? He's like Pharaoh. Like this ruler of Egypt, he's got all the authority and power, and we at his mercy. He said, chill, Bruce, vat het rustig, don't fear. What you did for evil, all this while, it was God's sovereign plan of salvation of you. It's God's sovereign plan of salvation of you. It's a picture of Jesus, né? Jesus being killed out of jealousy by his countrymen, by the children of Israel, and he's put up there. And he smiles and he says to him, what you did for evil. This was God's sovereign plan to save you. And not just you, all of the world. Just like Joseph. Not just you, but all of the world. So God's sovereignty doesn't happen apart from human authority, human actions. God is sovereign in control of everything. But it's a story of Daniel and his friends as well. I mean, Daniel's friends refused to worship the statue, the culture of Babylon, the statue that Nebuchadnezzar put up. And they were ratted out by the people, and they were brought before him. And Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to kill these Jews because he knew that these were three godly people with integrity. I mean, if you have just three godly people in a civil office, I mean, it's just the best gift that you had. These people are not embezzling money. These people aren't selling ESCOM out. These people aren't doing corrupt things, for contracts. These are godly people, good civil servants. And he said to them, he pleaded with them, he said, just bow down, just quickly bow down and I'll let this dude, I have the authority to let you go. Did you hear that? And they said to him, listen, Nia, Daniel 3:16, our God whom we serve is able to save us from this fire, Nebuchadnezzar. But let it be known to you that the God whom we serve is able to save us. But even if he does not save us, we will not bow down and worship your statue. Beautiful. And now what did God do? Oh, miraculously saved them from the fire. Nia, the opposite. God said, okay, I'll walk with you through the fire. I'll be with you. I'll walk with you through the fire. And that turned around so that Nebuchadnezzar ran down, a king running down in the Middle East, ran down, this Persian king ran down. He shouted, he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out of the fire. And they come out, and they didn't smell like fire, they weren't burnt, clothes or hair weren't scorched. And what was the story? He said, let it be, and he made a decree in all of Babylon, which ruled the whole of the known world in those days. Because of this, he turned around and he said, let everyone know in all the provinces that these people serve the living God, and that if anyone says any blasphemous thing about this living God in all the world, they will be executed. What did he bring about? A fear and a worship of the true God in all of Babylon. What those people meant for evil, God turned around for good, that his name may be revered. And this is the story that I want to invite you in, because when you look at ourselves now, if Jesus didn't escape the cross, if Joseph didn't escape slavery or the jail, if Daniel's friends did not escape the fire, if Daniel didn't escape the lion's den, why are we surprised when we don't escape the fire, the cross, the prison, the wilderness? Why are we surprised? Why are we surprised because deep down on the inside, all of us want to believe that my dad is really, really big, and that means I will never, ever have to suffer. I pray enough, and I'll be safe. The reality is that God is sovereign and God is in control. If we truly follow Jesus, Jesus didn't say it, Jesus said it in the most undeniable words. Those who desire to come after me will have trouble. In this world, you will have trouble. And this is what we said. Someone was in our house the other day, Margriet and myself, she was working through this book. Listen, if somehow you have not done this, I want to really encourage you. Don't you just want to make time in the week? It's just one paragraph a day, letterlijk. And just read a paragraph and just answer a reflective question. Because for the first time in life, she had to say, I'm over 40, I'm single, and I'm really alone. No, I don't think God really loves me, and I don't think God really hears my prayers. I don't think God is pleased with me, because otherwise my life would be easy. And I had to ask her and say, do you know someone else who said to God, God, will you please answer my prayer and help me with something that you can do? And he said no. And she knew I was referring to Jesus in the garden. And she said, yes, I know someone else. They're saying, so was it because God didn't love Jesus? Was it because God didn't love Joseph? Was it because God didn't love Daniel? No. Was it because they had sin in their life? Not a significant indicator in any of those. So why did the sovereign God allow them to walk through the fire? To bring about the salvation of many. It's an invitation, and this is the story of Israel through the Old Testament and Jesus through the New Testament. It is this story of the Bible. It is this story that if we follow Jesus, if we are disciples with Jesus, we are invited to bear his cross with him. Witnesses of a true faith, a true light that we're worshiping, regardless of what Nebuchadnezzar does, Pilate does, jealous brothers does, Potiphar does, or Pharaoh does. I believe that God is good. I believe that God is in control. I believe not just in this life, but I believe in eternal life. I believe that God is here. And my witness and my faith through the fire, this is what Peter says, no? And James, both of them refer to your faith being tested like fire, being proven to be true. A faith that is unproven is a faith that is unknown or uncertain. And I was saying to my friend the other day in my home, saying, you know, I've known you for 20 years. She was there she was one of the first persons who came to faith in our church plant long ago in Pretoria. And I said to her, you know what's amazing to me? I look at your life And you really have always been faithful in serving God. You kept yourself pure in all these years. You truly serve God, although God is saying to you no for 20 years. You are truly yielded to God. And your life is a witness that you truly trust in God. Otherwise, you would have done what Adam and Eve would have did long ago and saying, stuff this. I can choose the better way myself. I'll have it my way. And you go clubbing and give yourself to whoever and act like a tate, no? But there's a true faithfulness. She truly believes that God is sovereign. And she came to yield again to saying, God, if you want me, will you please take away this cup of loneliness from me? But if not, I'm willing to drink it. And I'm willing to follow you through the story. I'm willing to witness a true faith to you. It's mooi, né? Mooi story. So authority from above, sovereignty is not independent of human actions. It's very dependent on human actions and the invitation for us. So the question we have to ask, was Jesus a victim of political jealousy resulting in judicial murder? Yes. Or was Jesus the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. God is sovereign. God is in control of everything. Was Jesus a passive pawn of the Passover play? No. He was definitely not passive. He was a willing participant. The Father invited him and he asked him, saying, do this for me. And Jesus said, I don't want to. But if you want me to, I'll do it. But I don't want to. If there's a way out, let the way out. And the Father smiled and says, no, I want you to do this to bring many sons to glory. And Jesus said, okay. The word perpetuation for ons Afrikaanse mense is a willing substitute offering. Substitute offering. So the first thing I want to say to you about this, the good news, is that the invitation for us then is to follow in Jesus' steps, to recognize God's sovereignty and to follow in his steps. And the invitation for us is to recognize that all things work together for the good for those who love God. That because God is sovereign and because God invites us to follow in Jesus' footsteps, to follow in Joseph's footsteps, to follow in Daniel's footsteps and his friends' footsteps, we can see in all of these texts that God makes all things work together for the good for those who love. Because God is sovereign, God uses every situation to bring about the goodness. And I want you to see what it says there, and don't miss it. It speaks about a goodness because of your actions, and it speaks about a promotion for you. And we can see this in Joseph's life. We can see this in Job's life after his suffering. We can see this in Daniel's life. We can see this in his friend's life. That all of them, there's a sense of, if you walk with me through the fire, there's a blessing that comes, a real blessing. It becomes a real clarity of you knowing God, but there's also an authority and entrustment. God entrusts more to you in this world. But we can really see this. So this text basically tells us that nothing irredeemable can happen to a Christian. Nothing. Paul is writing this to people while Nero is Caesar in Rome, and he has set the city ablaze because he's blaming Christians for the disasters that come upon him. He fears the loss of the power. So he does crazy things. He killed his mother. He did crazy things. And Paul is encouraging the church, saying, listen, I just want you to know that nothing irredeemable can happen to you. You can never be worse off after anything if you walk with me through a situation. You're going to walk through the fire, I'll tell you that you'll be better off afterwards. If you'll be sold to slavery or thrown in a prison, you will be better off. And we can see this in every text in the Bible. If you lose everything, Job, you will be better off afterwards. Jesus, you're going to go through the fire, you're going to be crucified, you're going to be beaten, you'll be whipped. Short, momentary suffering, I want to tell you, you will be better off afterwards. But this is the first thing. You have to nail it down that all things work together for the good for those who love God. In all of these things, we are more than conquerors. The Christian life doesn't promise us that over all of these things. It means that not over the fire, I'll speak to the fire, Shandai, Shandai, and it will go down dead. It's going to burn. But what do we know? That in all of these things, we are more than conquerors. We'll walk through the flames, but you'll be a conqueror in it. I want you to know that people all over the world die because they follow God. Really die. Like really die. Is it because they don't have enough faith? It's probably my greatest critique of the victorious Christian faith. Shandai, Shandai. My life will be amazing. You know, you will never be sick in Jesus' name. If you stay under the covering of the umbrella, there will nothing happen. I'm like, did you say that to Jesus or to Joseph or to Daniel or to Israel as a whole? Did you say that to Paul? Did you say that to Peter? Did you say that to John? Because I tell you that your argument has no grounds biblically. Does God heal? Paul says so. Daniel says, yes, they all say that. Does God bring about miracles? Absolutely. Should we fight evil? Obviously. Obviously, this is the call of the church, to bring God's judgment, justice in the world. This is why all the prophets cried out, all the prophets were killed. All the prophets were killed. So it doesn't mean you're victorious. It means we resist evil because we are witnesses to his justice and his goodness. We're going to cry out like Wilberforce for the abolishment of slavery. We're going to call out like Tyler in China to stop the abuse of children and killing of children. You know, we're going to do that. It doesn't mean we just say, okay, whatever happens, happens. That's not what we're saying. We say we suffer because we participate in God's witness in the world. It's an unpopular issue because we proclaim his sovereignty, his political power in the city. Because of that. Okay, so that's it. In all of these things, we're more than conquerors through Jesus who loved us. All things work together for the good to those love of. Julle moet gou glimlag. Is lekker. This is good news. This is really good news. It's lekker. Thank you so much. The second thing is I just want you to see, coupling with that, is the reward. And I mentioned it earlier, but it's real. I love this text. When Jesus looked at, this is what I didn't say this morning, so I thought to bring some good news tonight. When Jesus looked at the cross, when Jesus looked at Pilate and smiling, and he said to Pilate, Pilate, you think you have authority over me? You're not in control. The Bible says, let's look to Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despised the shame, and he was seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So Jesus knew that this is temporal suffering to bring about eternal rewards. Temporal suffering to bring about eternal rewards. It's the same thing that James invites the church, the Jerusalem church in 45 after Christ, when he writes to them, saying that your faith is being tested like fire. He's saying to them, he said, don't lose heart when you go through great fires of grace testing. He said, don't be surprised, don't be troubled by it. He said, it's amazing. Let the veracity of your faith. What do we believe? That God is in control, that Jesus truly is Lord over the situation, and that somehow Jesus in his wisdom and his grace invites me to participate with his witness. And it involves in this season of my life, a short season of suffering, of hardship, of difficulty. I just want to say that to not get too fuzzy, this is not just when you're called before a throne. This can mean struggling with depression, the suffering of depression, and maintaining that Jesus is in control, and maintaining your witness that Jesus is in control and that Jesus is good, that Jesus does hear me, and truly maintaining in your heart the belief that although it seems that he doesn't answer you, although it may seem to others that you're crazy, that you don't, that God doesn't exist, or God doesn't hear you, or God doesn't have the power to save you from depression, you're maintaining the witness that I truly believe in him, and that I will worship him through this hardship, through this dark season. It can mean struggling in a really difficult marriage. It can, like my friend, struggling with a difficult life of loneliness. It can mean any of these things. It means suffering the injustice and shame of just discrimination within your own family, of just being treated as an outsider in your own family. You know, sin corrupts every sphere of society. But maintaining a true witness to God and knowing that there will be a day when there won't be any depression, any discrimination or jealousy, anything. Just maintaining the fact that God, somehow in your wisdom, you decide to say no. But I will continue to believe that you're good and that you're true. So just to not remove it too far away from the life that you're living, or even a work situation. Let us look to Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith. The invitation for us to look to him in this situation, and just to know that there was a reward for being faithful. One of the most beautiful rewards we see repeat in the book of Revelation is a crown of faithfulness given to one who constantly believes that God is good. Amen. I'm closing. So trust and yield as to the Lord. I want you to sit now with this one, because we're talking about leadership and the invitation in the beginning. And the text says, let every person be subject to governing authority. How does this sit with you? I mean, you know that this was written to the church, subject to Nero, no? So, let every person be subject to Zuma. Let every person be subject to governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God. And those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities, resist what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. When Paul was writing a little bit later to Timothy, he said, Timothy, I want men everywhere to raise your hands in prayer and pray for kings and for Caesar and all those in authority, that they may live a peaceable life. And you're going like, is jy mal in jou kop? And he's saying, no, God is truly sovereign with these ungodly leaders, because this is a pattern that he has seen in the text. Through Pilate and the Sanhedrin and Herod and Nebuchadnezzar and Pharaoh and Potiphar, God is sovereign in all of these situations. God's kingdom is advancing through these people. In their futile resistance of God, God is smiling and saying, you are serving me in this situation. So how does it feel? I just want you to pray about this. This is one of the questions we want to ask you. How does it feel looking at this text in your current context? Maybe you're thinking of South Africa and the election year, and just think, God, if there's a Christian party in control, everything will be perfect. And I'm like, if the Christian party is truly led by Jesus manifesting himself, yes. But my history reads that people are sinful, and that's why we hurt one another. Because I know that for myself as well, you know. My children know that I love Jesus, but I hurt them, you know. I do things that afterwards I think, why did you do that? Why were you so irritable? Why are you so short-tempered? Where's your kindness, you know? We do these things. Let every person be subject to governing authorities, for there's no authority except from God. So I want you to sit with this one. And the invitation for us is to yield to authorities as we yield to Jesus. They are not Jesus. When they command us to do anything ungodly, we just say that what Daniel's friend said, no sir, no ma'am, I will not do this. My God is able to save me from your wrath, but even if he doesn't, I won't bow the knee. I'd gladly walk through the fire. I'd gladly walk through the fire. It's okay. It's just really a yieldedness to Jesus. The second thing is to not be surprised. And this is what I want to say to younger people especially. The longer you live, the more history informs you that die lewe is so lekker nie. So I just want to say what Peter said to the church in Rome, saying, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you and it tests you, as though something strange were happening to you all of a sudden. He's saying it's not something strange. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed in you. He's saying, listen, in this world you will have trouble, Jesus said. So he said, don't be surprised when things turn tough. So it's just a readiness in your heart to saying, God, I'm serving you not just because you're good, because that was what Satan said, no? Saying, this boy Job only serves you because his life is so lekker and because you bless him so much. I mean, who would not serve you? Look how great he is. And then God said, the Father said of Job, he's saying to Satan, listen, this boy has a sincere worship of me. He doesn't just serve me when things are good. He truly recognizes me as the great God. He's really subject to my sovereignty. And then Satan said, can I test him? Can I have at him? And the Father said, test him. Test him. He won't bow the knee to you. He won't. And Job is a letter to us to show that Jesus is a type of Job. Job is a type of Jesus. Paul was one. You and I will be as well. There will be a time when loss, when sickness, when things knock at our doors. And in that moment we will go, but is God really this good? Or is God really in control? Or the second question we always ask, we as good Calvinist Christians, we always go like, oh, did I sin to open a door for the devil? And if that's your reading of Job, then I say, please reread it. Because God was smiling because Job had nothing that he did wrong. He was not sinless. But this had nothing to do with Job. This had to do with the Father proving that this boy truly loves me. And truly, he has received an eternal reward. You know what his greatest reward is? For the past 3,000 years, people all over the world looked at his letter and saying, wow, God truly is a rewarder of those who faithfully hold on to him. Stop looking inside as though something's wrong with me. Stop pointing the finger as though something is wrong with God. And just yield, as Jesus showed us, to a God who's truly sovereign in control. And knowing that all things will work together for the good for those who love him. And there is a crown that will come to me as well. It's mooi, né? Ek weet ek preek nou lank. Ek gaan nou stop. Okay. So, invitation for me. As I read through the book, there's a question that we ask this week. Many are the plans in a man's heart, the Lord's purposes will sustain. God is sovereign, I make plans, but God truly is in control. So the invitation is to write down your plans. Write down your desires. What do you see will happen with your life? Just broad strokes. And as I wrote down a few things, because I didn't have specific things, you know, I want to do this or this. It's like, just generally, this is how I see my life playing out for me and my family. And then after a while, I figured out, no pain, no pain. Somehow in my life, I don't plan for any pain. I don't plan for discomfort. Why would you plan for discomfort, you know? So I'm like, and the question I just had to go is like, God, I shouldn't be surprised because life generally doesn't work out perfect for most of us. And there will be a time when my faith and my devotion to God will be tested. And the invitation is, will I yield to the Lord and say, Lord, here I am, ready to serve you in this season? Or will I fight, or will I deny? And I'll tell you that God is faithful. He looks at you like he looks to Job, and he's saying, look at that boy. He's going to worship me, although he doesn't have everything perfect. So my last one, the invitation in prayer. And Anna, I was wondering if we can sing the Lord's Prayer tonight. Can we? Tian opened in prayer, but if we can sing it, it will be amazing. Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will be done, but yours. There's invitation for us to stand here tonight, and perhaps there is a gnawing pain in your life at the moment, you know, and you've been praying to God, will you please take this away? I don't know what it is, but please take this away. And, or perhaps you're praying for someone else who's going through a tough time, and you go like, God, come on, just take it away. Just take that cup away from that person. But to add that bit, saying, Father, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. The second Adam prayer, saying, God, I'm willing to submit to you, and I'm willing to continue to worship you, although this thing does not change in my life. I'm willing to go to the cross, to walk through the fire, to be imprisoned for your sake. You know, Joseph, Daniel, Jesus. I'm willing to do this. Just want you to sit with that for a while and just ready your heart in that. Knowing that if you say yes to him in that regard, you can already start delighting in the crown of faithfulness that will be given to you as a reward, as it will be given to everyone who remains faithful to him in this life. Knowing that all things work together for the good. But will you say yes to the Lord when he says no? Amen. So let's stand and worship God in this. We're going to pray for people now, but let's just